The china cup hit the floor before I even realized I'd let it go. Tea spread across the hardwood like a dark stain of betrayal. My daughter-in-law stood in my foyer, smiling, a set of keys dangling from her hand. "It's time. Maggie," she said. "The truck's outside. You're moving into care today. My name is Margaret Holloway. I'm 61 years old, and my daughter-in-law decided I was no longer fit to own my life. But what they didn't know was I had been waiting for this moment. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. This isn't just a story about a toxic daughter-in-law, it's about how quiet women build ironclad defenses. If you've ever been gaslit in your own home, stay with me. The next 5 minutes will change how you see helpful family forever. When I think about the months that led up to that morning, it's strange how quietly everything began. There was no shouting, no broken dishes, no slammed doors, just small, polite moments that, one by one, began to carve cracks through my peace. 10 years earlier, when my husband, Edward, passed away, I'd built a new rhythm for myself. Mornings with black coffee on the porch, teaching literature part-time at the local high school, evenings filled with the smell of old books and sea air drifting through open windows. My Victorian house in Charleston had always been my sanctuary, the creak of its wooden stairs, the tick of the old clock in the hallway, the garden where I still planted hydrangeas every spring. When Daniel, my only son, told me he was seeing someone, I remember the way his voice softened. "Mom," I remember the way his voice softened. "She's amazing." He had that hopeful tone men get when they want their mother's approval before they've even asked for it. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be happy for him. The first time I met Tara, she arrived 10 minutes early, her smile perfectly timed, her hair cascading like a commercial for shampoo. She brought macarons in a white box tied with ribbon. "From that French bakery downtown," she said. "I heard you like classic things." It was a small remark, but something about her phrasing the way she said classic sounded like a polite synonym for old. She called me Mrs. Holloway at first, but by dessert she had switched to Maggie, the kind of familiarity that skips permission and lands like a hand on your shoulder you didn't ask for. She complimented my house, my china, my dress. Then she asked how I spent my free time now that I was retired. I wasn't retired. Not really. I consulted for the school district, still graded papers on occasion. But the way she said it light, almost pitying, made me hear the word useless between her syllables. Edward used to say, but the way she said it light, I didn't understand what he meant until much later. Over the next few months, Tara became a constant presence. She'd drop by on Saturdays with croissants, and that same too-sweet herbal tea she insisted was amazing for circulation. The first time I drank it, I felt lightheaded, like I'd been standing in the sun too long. I thought maybe it was the heat or my blood pressure. When I mentioned it, she laughed softly. "Maybe your body's not used to detoxing. Maggie, that tea cleans everything out." Daniel ordered. He laughed more around her, his eyes bright like when he was a teenager. Watching him, I kept quiet about the tea, about the faint dizziness, about the faint smell of her perfume that lingered in my kitchen long after she left sweet. Artificial, like sugar hiding something sour. When they got engaged, they asked to host the dinner at my house. Tara planned everything, from the table settings to the playlist. "It'll be elegant but simple," she said, standing in my dining room as if she already owned it. She even rearranged my furniture for better flow. I remember standing at the doorway, watching her move my piano 2 feet to the left, her fingers leaving faint prints on the polished surface. It felt like watching someone edit a memory I wasn't ready to change. The engagement dinner was beautiful. I'll admit that. Candlelight flickered off crystal glasses. Laughter filled the air. And everyone toasted to love. To the future. But later that night, when I was washing dishes, I noticed my wedding band wasn't on the counter where I'd left it before cooking. I searched the sink, the drawers, even the trash. Nothing. I told myself I must have misplaced it. I didn't want to think otherwise. A week later, Tara came over again, holding a small gift bag. "For you," she said sweetly. Inside was a bottle of lavender oil and a note. "For sleep, you've been so tired lately." I hadn't told anyone I'd been waking at 3:00 a.m. with my heart pounding, dreams looping through fog. I smiled politely. "Thank you." She leaned in close. "You really should take better care of yourself. Maggie." Daniel worries. You know. That night, I poured the oil into the trash. I didn't even want it in the house. Evelyn, my oldest friend, was the first person I confessed my unease to. We were sitting in her bookstore, Grant's Books and Coffee, the one with creaky floors and the smell of paper that never leaves your clothes. She listened quietly, stirring her coffee. "You think she's up to something?" she asked. "I don't know. Maybe I'm just paranoid." "Paranoid," she repeated, tasting the word. "Or perceptive. There's a difference." Maggie. 2 weeks later. Evelyn called me out of breath. "You won't believe this. That woman Tara, her name showed up in a financial blog. She used to work at Horizon Media in Atlanta. Got fired for mismanagement of client funds. It's all hush-hush, but it's there if you dig." I sat at my kitchen table staring at my phone. I wanted to tell Daniel, but when I called, he didn't answer. Later that evening, he texted, "We're having dinner with friends. Can I call you tomorrow?" Tomorrow came and went. Then another. When we finally spoke, he seemed distracted, almost distant. "Mom, you've got to stop overthinking. Tara says you've been tense lately. Maybe you should take it easy." Tara says, the words slipped out before I could stop them. He said, "She cares about you." "Mom, you don't need to be defensive." Defensive. That word burned. I ended the call quickly and sat in silence. In the reflection of the window, I saw myself, an aging woman sitting alone at a kitchen table built for 4. The next morning, I found a new set of house keys on the counter, labeled neatly in Tara's handwriting. For convenience, I hadn't given her permission to copy them. That was the first time I realized something was very wrong. I started writing everything down: dates, conversations, feelings, just like I used to tell my students to do when analyzing a story. Details reveal truth. I'd say, I didn't realize how literal that would become. Then came the first real scare. I was baking muffins when the room tilted sharply. My vision blurred, the floor rippled. I remember grabbing the counter, breathing through panic. When I came to, half an hour had passed. My teacup was empty beside me. When I told Daniel later, he frowned. "Mom, you've got to start letting people help you. Maybe Tara's right, you've been pushing yourself too hard." "I'm fine," I said, but even to my own ears, it sounded uncertain. That night, I sat by the window, notebook in hand, writing one sentence over and over. "If they think I'm losing my mind, they'll take everything." I didn't know it then, but that thought would save me later. The days that followed blurred together, warm light spilling through lace curtains, Tara's laughter echoing down the hall, and that steady hum of something off in my own home. She had started coming over even when Daniel wasn't around. "Just checking on you," she'd say. holding a reusable grocery bag full of healthy snacks. The kind of visits that looked kind on the outside but felt like surveillance underneath. It started small. She accidentally rearranged my medication organizer. Then my grocery deliveries began to include items I hadn't ordered: low-sodium soup, memory supplements, decaf coffee. Just helping. She'd smile. Her voice sugared. I wanted to believe it was kindness. I really did. But each gesture chipped away a little more of my independence. Until one afternoon, when I found my bank statement open on the kitchen counter, I hadn't left it there. "Tara," I said, my voice calm but steady, "have you been going through my mail?" She didn't even flinch. "Of course not, Maggie. But Daniel told me you'd been forgetting to pay some bills." I thought I could help. "I haven't forgotten anything." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "It's okay. Really. Nobody blames you. Aging's hard." That word aging landed like a dart. Sharp, precise, cruel. That night, I sat at my desk, opened my old leather journal, and started cataloging everything: dates, changes, tone of voice, missing objects, strange texts from Daniel that sounded like someone else had written them. I installed a tiny webcam above the bookshelf, facing the living room. Not for protection, just proof. A few weeks later, I found a legal envelope slipped under my front door. It was from a firm I didn't recognize, Lewis and Martin Associates. Inside was a draft titled Voluntary Power of Attorney Agreement. It bore my name at the top and Tara's signature neatly typed at the bottom, awaiting only mine. I remember standing there in the kitchen, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. When Daniel came by that evening, I held it up. "What's this?" He looked uncomfortable. "Tara just thought it might make things easier if what?" I interrupted. "If something happened to you," he said softly. "It's just a precaution." I stared at him. My son, my sweet boy, couldn't even look me in the eye. "Daniel," I said carefully, "if you think I'm incapable, then look at me right now and say it." He didn't. He just rubbed the back of his neck and muttered, "Mom, please don't make this a big deal." When he left, I sat down on the edge of the bed. For the first time in years, I cried not from fear, but from the realization that I was being erased slowly, politely, under the guise of care. The next morning, Evelyn came over unannounced. She looked at the document, her lips thinning. "You're not signing this." "I wasn't planning to." She tapped her chin. "Then we play it smart. Make copies. Leave one with your lawyer. Keep a backup off-site." That was the moment I realized Evelyn was more than a friend. She was my quiet ally. Later that week, she introduced me to Janet Cole, a legal consultant she trusted. Janet examined the paperwork and frowned. "This form isn't standard. The signature field for witness verification is missing. Whoever drafted this wasn't expecting it to be reviewed." That's when I knew Tara wasn't just manipulative, she was dangerous. I started testing her. When she offered to make me tea, I'd switch the cups. Her expression tightened the first time I did it. "You don't trust me?" she asked. "I trust no one who hands me a drink without asking what I want." I said simply. From that day, she stopped offering tea. Daniel, meanwhile, became harder to reach. He started missing our Sunday dinners, saying work was too demanding. But I saw through it. The growing gap wasn't work, it was her. Every text he sent sounded like it had been pre-approved by Tara. "Love you. Mom. Please rest. Don't stress so much." Always short. Always distant. Then one night, as I was preparing for bed, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. The message read, If you value your house, check your title deeds. Quietly. I froze. The sender's name was hidden, but something about the phrasing felt familiar. I logged into the county records website and my stomach dropped. There was a pending request for a co-ownership transfer filed 3 days earlier, listing Daniel and Tara as joint applicants. They were trying to take my house. I printed everything. Called Janet. She told me, "Don't confront them yet. Let them think you're oblivious. Build your file. Every shred counts." So I did. Over the next month, I played the role of the confused widow. I smiled when Tara explained my finances. I nodded when Daniel offered to manage my accounts. I let them believe they were winning. Meanwhile, Evelyn and I worked quietly, setting up cloud storage, encrypting my journal, installing a discreet audio recorder in the dining room chandelier. One afternoon, I overheard them in the kitchen. I'd left the phone recording on the counter. Tara's voice was a whisper. "She's slipping. Daniel, it's time. The evaluation's next week. Once we have that, she can't fight it." He hesitated. "I don't know. Tara. She seems fine lately. She's good at pretending." Tara said sharply, "But when she forgets where she put her pills next, don't come crying to me." I could almost hear the hooks sinking deeper into him. I thought the worst was over until the doctor's appointment. Tara drove me herself, insisting it was just a routine checkup. The office was sterile and quiet. The receptionist overly cheerful. But something felt off. The form they handed me didn't look medical, it was psychological. Cognitive screening. It said, "Why are we doing this?" I asked. Tara laughed softly. "Just procedure. Maggie. They want to make sure everything's fine before the insurance renewal." I didn't sign. I told them I'd forgotten my reading glasses and needed to reschedule. When we got back home, her tone changed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said flatly. "You need supervision." I stared at her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. Maybe you're right. Maybe I do. That night, I drove out to my beach cottage. The one Edward had built with his own hands, the one Tara didn't even know existed. I dusted off the shelves, plugged in my old laptop, and uploaded every file I had: audio, photos, documents to a secure drive. I called Evelyn. "It's happening," I whispered. "They're going to move me out of my house." Evelyn's voice was calm. "Then we make sure they walk right into it. But on your terms." The next morning, I returned home and acted as if nothing had changed. I smiled when Tara walked in. I offered her tea. She refused. That was when I knew she was starting to suspect I wasn't as helpless as she thought. Still, she underestimated me. They always do. I didn't know it then. But I was already holding every piece I'd need to end at my journal. My recordings. And something even stronger. Their arrogance. Because arrogance, I would learn, is louder than any confession. Things began to unravel in ways I couldn't control, or at least, that's what I let them believe. Tara was an expert at what I now call social poisoning. She didn't destroy your reputation with one big lie. She did it through 100 little half-truths, whispered sweetly in sympathetic tones. The first attack came through Daniel. He arrived one Sunday afternoon, wearing that cautious expression reserved for delivering bad news. "Mom," he started gently. "Tara said you called her at midnight last week and didn't remember." I blinked. That never happened. He hesitated. "You said some confusing things. About Dad. About money." "I was asleep at midnight," he said, rubbing his temple like he was tired. "Maybe check your phone history." Tara said she saved the voicemail. There was no voicemail. There never was. But by the time I tried to explain that, The seed was already planted. He left early that day. No hug, no promise to call. Just the faint sound of the door clicking shut behind him, a sound that echoed for hours. That week, small things started to go missing. My reading glasses, my will, a framed picture of Edward and me on our wedding day. I searched everywhere, but they'd simply vanished. When I mentioned it to Tara, she smiled that same flawless smile. "Oh, Maggie, you probably just misplaced them. Happens to the best of us." Then came the night of the dinner. I'd been invited to their house, a sleek, modern place that always smelled like eucalyptus and money. Tara greeted me in a silk dress, wine glass in hand. "You made it. I was starting to worry you'd forget." She said it loudly enough that Daniel heard. He shot me a look of concern, the kind that says, "We've talked about this before." I forced a smile. "Traffic," I replied. Halfway through dinner, she reached for my glass of wine. "Oh no, Maggie, you're not supposed to mix alcohol with your medication." I froze. "What medication?" She blinked. Feigning innocence. "Your memory pills?" "Right. The ones Dr. Levin prescribed." Danielle looked up. "You didn't tell me about that." "Mom, because they don't exist," I said evenly. "I don't take any pills." The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Tara broke it with a soft laugh. "Oh, I must have misunderstood. You've just been off lately. That's all." She had mastered the art of plausible cruelty. A few days later, I ran into our neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, at the grocery store. She looked at me with concern. "Maggie, dear, Tara told me you've been having a hard time adjusting since Edward passed." "I'm so sorry." I didn't correct her. I just nodded. Because I realized something then. Tara wasn't only gaslighting me privately. She was crafting a narrative publicly, piece by piece. She was turning the world into her witness. By early fall, Daniel stopped dropping by unannounced. When he did visit, Tara came with him. Always. She hovered near every conversation, finishing my sentences when I paused, interpreting my words before I could clarify them. Once, when I reached for my purse, she said gently, "Let me handle it." "Maggie, you always forget where you put your cards." I looked her dead in the eye. "Do I?" Her smile didn't waver. "You do. But it's okay. That's why I'm here." It was a performance. One she executed so flawlessly that even I began doubting my own sanity. But Evelyn didn't. She came by one evening with 2 cups of coffee and a small black USB drive. "Check this," she said. "Security footage from my shop. Tara's been meeting with someone. Middle-aged guy. Slick suit. Every Friday." I watched the footage on my laptop. It showed Tara handing over an envelope. Then, leaning forward, whispering something that made the man smile. Evelyn tapped the screen. "Recognize him." I did. He was the notary who'd verified my late husband's business documents years ago. That night, I realized I wasn't fighting confusion. I was fighting a conspiracy. Still, I said nothing. Silence became my weapon. Then came the legal letter. A notice of assessment claiming overdue property tax. I nearly laughed when I read it. It was clearly forged. Wrong letterhead. Outdated font. And a return address that no longer existed. But it was clever. It would have fooled anyone else. When I asked Daniel about it, he looked uneasy. "Tara said she's handling it. Don't worry about paperwork anymore." I smiled thinly. "Oh, I'm not worried." Inside, I was terrified but also calculating. The next morning, I took a trip to the courthouse myself. The clerk confirmed my records were up to date. I asked for copies, stamped and sealed. Proof. Then I went home, made digital scans, and stored them in 3 separate places: my laptop, the cloud, and a USB I tucked inside the hollow base of Edward's old lamp. For weeks, I kept collecting, observing, pretending. Every lie she told became a breadcrumb in my file. Every mistake she staged became a time-stamped entry. By the time fall turned to winter, Tara had nearly succeeded. Daniel barely looked me in the eye. My friends whispered that maybe I had changed. My name on certain bank accounts had quietly disappeared. But what Tara didn't know was that I had been changing too, into someone far more dangerous than the woman she'd underestimated. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I prepared, and when she finally staged her grand betrayal, the night she tried to have me declared legally incompetent, I was ready. The night of the so-called family dinner is burned into my memory like smoke on fabric, no matter how much you wash it. The smell stays. Tara had invited me, saying it would be a small dinner, just the 3 of us. When I arrived, there were 2 other people waiting at the table. A man in a suit with a thin leather briefcase and a woman in a gray blazer. Pretending to check her phone. "Mom," Daniel greeted me with a nervous smile. "We thought it might be a good time to talk about plans." Plans. That word again. It had started as a whisper in my life and grown into a storm. Tara poured wine, her hand steady, her face glowing with false warmth. "Just a formality," she said. "We've been worried about you living alone. Maggie, we just want to make sure you're taken care of. Isn't that right?" "Daniel," he nodded, eyes darting between us. The man in the suit opened his briefcase. He nodded. I didn't have to look closely to recognize it. Power of attorney. The same document I'd refused to sign weeks ago this time, with a few details filled in. "You can read it if you'd like," the man said kindly. "It's all standard." Tara placed her hand on my arm. Nails painted a perfect pale pink. "Please, Maggie, we're just trying to protect you. You've been forgetful lately. Remember when you left the stove on?" I set the pen down slowly. "That was you. Tara. You were cooking that night." The smile froze on her lips. Daniel's brow furrowed. "What's she talking about?" "Stress," Tara said quickly. "She's confused. It happens." My heart pounded, but my voice stayed calm. "You're right about one thing, Tara. It does happen, but it won't happen again." I stood up, taking my purse. "If you ever bring forged papers into my home again, I'll call my lawyer." Daniel looked mortified. Tara, though, didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, eyes glinting like glass. "Lawyers can't protect you from yourself, Maggie." That night, I knew what she was going to do next. She would escalate. And she did. Within a week, she started planting real evidence. First, a missing credit card. Then, a report filed under my name for suspicious purchases. The police came to my door one morning with polite smiles and clipboards. "Routine inquiry." "Ma'am." They found nothing. Of course. But the humiliation was enough. I could feel my neighbor's eyes on me afterward. Then came the online posts, anonymous comments on local forums about an elderly woman in Charleston losing her mind. One post mentioned my street. Another, my job. Evelyn found them before I did. "She's spreading this everywhere," she said, voice shaking. "We have to act soon." I told her, "Not yet. Let her believe I'm crumbling." The truth was, I was exhausted emotionally, physically, but I couldn't afford to collapse. I kept up the facade. even when Daniel stopped answering my calls entirely. He'd text instead. "Mom, we'll talk soon. Please don't stress Tara out. She's trying her best." Those messages hurt worse than anything Tara had said. One evening, as I sat reading in the half-light of my living room, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door unlocking. Tara walked in, humming softly. "You really should change your locks," she said, holding a folder. "This place isn't safe for someone like you." I felt my throat tighten. "You copied my keys." "Of course I did," she said casually. "I'm family." She placed the folder on the table. "Daniel and I have decided it's time to transition you somewhere more comfortable. A facility with full-time staff. You'll love it there." My pulse slowed. I remembered Edward's words before he died. "Don't sign anything while your heart is racing." So I smiled. "That sounds wonderful, dear. Let's talk about it over tea." I brewed her favorite, the same chamomile blend she'd been feeding me for months. But this time, I didn't drink. I just watched her take a sip, watched her eyes narrow when she realized I hadn't touched mine. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing," I said softly. "Just observing patterns." The next morning, I left town quietly. No note. No message. I went to the beach cottage and called Janet. "It's time," I said. "She's moving for guardianship." Janet's voice was firm. "Then let's give her what she wants, enough rope to hang herself." We began coordinating everything. Documentation, video backups, timestamps, Evelyn's security footage, my audio recordings. Every piece ready to strike. But before the storm broke, there was one final cruelty. Daniel showed up at my cottage, eyes red. "Mom, why are you doing this? Tara says you're paranoid. She says you're recording her." "I am," I said calmly. He looked horrified. "You need help." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just see things you don't." He left angry, confused, torn in two. Watching his car disappear down the road felt like losing him twice, once as my son, and once as the man he could have been without her. That night, a storm rolled in off the coast. Lightning flashed across the water, thunder shaking the walls. I stood by the window, watching waves crash against the shore, and whispered to the dark, "You wanted control. Tara, you'll have it, just not the way you planned." Because by morning, the trap would be set. And once it closed, not even Daniel's blind loyalty could save her. It happened just before dawn, the hour when everything feels half real, when dreams and waking blur together. Rain lashed against the windows. Thunder muttered low in the distance. I'd been awake all night, sitting in the dark cottage with the old clock ticking beside me, waiting for what I knew was coming. At exactly 4:47 a.m., my phone buzzed, a motion alert from the security system I'd rigged inside the Charleston house. The feed opened to a shaky image. Then silhouettes moving quickly under umbrellas. Tara, Daniel, and two strangers, men in work clothes with empty boxes in their hands. I hit record. Tara's voice cut through the rain, sharp as a whip. "Just grab the valuables first. Her jewelry's in the dresser. We'll deal with the rest later." One of the men hesitated. "You sure she's out?" "She's in assisted living now," she snapped. "My husband signed the paperwork." My husband. The words twisted in my gut. I watched as they pushed open the front door, my door, and stepped into the hallway, water dripping from their jackets. Tara began moving with surgical precision, pointing, commanding. "That chest, take it. The lamp, too." She picked up framed photos, pausing briefly at one of Edward and me before tossing it face down onto the floor. I switched to another camera, the one hidden in the chandelier above the dining table. The audio was crisp. Daniel's voice was trembling. "Tara, maybe we should wait. What if Mom comes back?" "She won't." Tara said, "What if Mom comes back? Stop being weak. She's not even legally allowed here anymore." Lightning flashed through the windows. Cold. Victorious. At that same moment, my phone vibrated again. Another alert. Unfamiliar device connected to home Wi-Fi. She was trying to wipe the footage. But what she didn't know was that the cameras weren't uploading to the house network. They were sending everything directly to cloud storage and to Janet's secured drive. I called Janet. "It's happening," I said. Her voice came sharp and steady. "Stay put. Police are en route. I already sent them the warrant." The warrant. The one we'd prepared 2 weeks earlier. Based on Evelyn's footage and the fake legal filings. Everything was already in motion. On the screen, Tara's tone changed suddenly. She had found my journal, the black leather one with Edward's initials embossed on the cover. She flipped through the pages and laughed. "See, she's delusional. She writes like she's being spied on," Daniel said quietly. "You were spying on her. She needed guidance." "Tara," he said. This was Mercy. There was a loud knock at the door. The kind of knock that makes your stomach drop. Tara froze. "Who the hell?" "Charleston PD." "Open up." "Who the hell?" "Charleston PD." Eyes wide. The 2 men bolted for the back door. Tara spun in circles, whispering, "No, no, no." From my cottage, I watched it unfold like theater. The front door burst open. Her face drained of color. I watched it unfold like theater. The 2 men bolted for the back door. Shouted commands. "This is a mistake. This is our property. Charleston PD. Mom owns this house. She never sold it." They cuffed her right there in the entryway. Her hair was soaked. "No." The police found the fake POA documents in her bag, along with 2 forged medical files and an empty vial of the sedative she'd been mixing into my tea. The officer's radio crackled. "Copy that. Confirmed fraudulent guardianship case. Send backup." I didn't smile. Not yet. I just sat there, watching the woman who had tried to erase me finally realize she'd been outplayed. At 6:12 a.m., Janet called again. "They've got her. You can come in now if you want." When I arrived, the sky was just beginning to lighten, the rain softening into drizzle. The house smelled of wet wood and cheap perfume. Daniel stood in the foyer, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. He turned when he saw me. "Mom," his voice cracked. "I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know." I looked at him for a long moment. "My son. I didn't know." Laughing. Now standing in the wreckage of what his wife had built and destroyed. "You wanted to protect her," I said quietly. "Now you'll have to live with what that cost you." Tara was still inside, sitting on the couch with her hands cuffed. When our eyes met, she tried for her usual smirk, but it faltered. "You think you've won," she whispered. "You don't know what I've had to survive." "I know exactly what you are," I said, "and now everyone else does too." As they let her out, her perfume lingered in the air, a sickly sweet scent that mixed with the salt of rain and the faint metallic tang of fear. The officers carried out boxes of evidence. The fake documents. My missing jewelry. The hard drive she'd tried to destroy. Janet arrived moments later with Detective Ross from the Financial Crimes Unit. They exchanged a glance, and he nodded. "Federal case now. She's been running this scam in 3 states. Outside, reporters had already gathered, the story spreading faster than the dawn. I stepped into the yard. The air smelled clean again. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling like I was being watched. Daniel came up beside me, his voice breaking. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "No," I said softly. "You don't." He nodded, tears glistening. "But I'll try to earn it." For the first time, I believed he might. I turned back toward the house, toward what was left of my life. The walls were bare, my memories stripped. But something inside me had shifted steel where there once was fear. People think revenge is fire, but it isn't. It's ice slow, silent, patient. And when it finally breaks, it's the cold that sets you free. I walked inside, closed the door, and let the quiet swallow everything else. The next weeks passed like fog thick, silent, disorienting. Reporters camped near the courthouse. Neighbors whispered in grocery aisles. And yet, in the middle of all that noise, I felt an unfamiliar peace. I moved back to the beach cottage full-time. It wasn't grand 2 rooms, creaky floors, salt-stained windows, but it was mine. Mine in a way nothing had been for months. Each morning, I brewed coffee, sat by the window, and watched the tide erase footprints from the sand. I liked that image, the sea quietly reclaiming what belonged to it. Daniel called every few days. He always started the same way. "Hi. Mom. How are you feeling?" And I always answered, "I'm better, Daniel." Healing takes time. We never mentioned Tara. We didn't need to. Her trial was set for spring charges of fraud, identity theft, and attempted elder abuse. Sometimes, justice doesn't roar, it murmurs, steady and unrelenting. I spent my days sorting through journals, voice memos, and the fragments of my old life. Evelyn would visit on Sundays, bringing croissants and gossip. Janet came by once, handing me a manila envelope full of official paperwork proof that every false claim against me had been cleared. "You're legally untouchable now," she said with a small smile. I nodded. "Good, because I'm not done yet." She raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "I'm writing," I said simply. "A book. About guardianship abuse. About the ways people use love as a weapon." She smiled wider. "You always were a teacher." About the ways people use love as a weapon. By January, you always were a teacher. The guardian trap. The first chapter began with a line I'd written years ago but never understood until now. They call it protection when they mean control. It's contradicted with ride. The cottage became my sanctuary and my studio. I recorded every detail. The forged forms. The doctored pills. The silence that almost destroyed me. It wasn't just therapy, it was armor. One night, as I closed my laptop, a soft knock echoed at the door. No one ever visited after dark. When I opened it, there was no one there. Only a white envelope sitting on the step, edges damp from mist. Inside was a single piece of paper, typed, unsigned. "You think it's over, but I'm not the only one who wanted your money." No signature, no return address. Just that one sentence, sharp, deliberate, unfinished. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the waves crash beyond the dunes. My fear didn't return. My pulse didn't race. I just smiled a slow, knowing smile. My pulse didn't race. I just smiled a slow, because whoever had sent it had already made one fatal mistake. And this time, if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit like and subscribe. Because stories like mine aren't just fiction, they happen in quiet kitchens, behind smiling faces, in houses that once felt safe. Tell me where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when no one believed you. I read every comment. This story isn't over. The guardian trap is just beginning. And the letter on my doorstep, it means the past hasn't finished with me yet. See you in the next chapter. The guardian trap is just beginning.